India, a land of diversity and opportunities, is standing at the helm of a new dawn. As a nation of 1.33 billion population, India is embracing new technologies and solutions to ride the wave of change. A critical element that will leverage this momentum is the use and adoption of geospatial and space technologies. Today, India is the second most preferred market for the global geospatial industry. India's geospatial economy is estimated to be valued at $3 billion, with over $1 billion coming from export of geospatial services. The geospatial industry employs more than 250,000 professionals. However, due to the restrictive and complex policy environment, India's geospatial market is highly under-realized. While the Indian geospatial market is growing at about 15% per annum, it has the potential to grow at 25% annually, making it worth $7 billion, employing nearly 1 million people by 2025. A national geospatial and Earth observation industrial policy for India can empower the entire ecosystem, laying the foundation for a self-reliant India in the digital age.
Well, many of you would have noticed that the Honorable Finance Minister of the Government of India did make an announcement about the reforms as part of the bigger reforms of the Government of India around the COVID situation. And one of those sectors is the space and geospatial reforms. While we are under the finalization of the policies, this program is designed to develop a kind of debate and deliberations and also share our inputs to the Government of India and authorities for consideration while making that policy. We have a very good line of speakers, and thank you to each one of you for having taken time out of your busy schedule. But what more we could have expected, we have none other but Professor VijayRaghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, someone who has taken a very keen interest in the field of geospatial technology of late, and we have been working with him on various occasions to develop a broader consultation process with regard to the integration of geospatial as within the science and technology gamut of the country. Without taking much of your time, I would like to invite Professor VijayRaghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, to deliver his opening keynote address. Professor VijayRaghavan. Very warm welcome, sir.
I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you very much. There is, in today's world, and particularly in terms of what we're going through now, but even otherwise, there is no aspect as important as the collection, sharing, interpretation, and application of geospatial knowledge. And this covers the whole range, not just from what we gather by satellite and by other methods which are off terrestrial, but also integrating that with data which we get from multiple other sources. It is this integration which is absolutely critical for us. But this is beset with multiple kinds of problems, many of which we are also familiar with. But the most fundamental problem which I think which we need to grasp is the following, that there is a view that somehow data in itself is great wealth and therefore is to be protected. Data is indeed very valuable, but it is, and many people have given similarities of data to oil, but unlike oil, data in itself cannot be possessed by individuals, right? You might have a little bit of oil which you can sell, but your little bit of data is meaningful only when it's collected along with others. But more fundamentally, that data needs to be collected, distilled, analyzed, interpreted in a context-dependent manner. This typically requires the interaction of multiple agencies, public and private. And an attempt to protect the data can also lead to its lack of interaction and use. And if you correspondingly go to the other end of the pendulum and loosen up too much, then data can be enormously misused. So let me quickly go through what I think are the key aspects a policy should have in the context of the industrial revolution which is going on right now. So over the last 50 years, GI, geographic information, has evolved as a common language for billions of people around the world. And with the fourth industrial revolution now, driven by big data, AI, and machine learning, geospatial information is ubiquitous. Now, this has to be linked to sustainable development in an effective manner. And indeed, collection of data and use in health, agriculture, and weather, and so on, has an extraordinary role in sustainable development and for public good. Now, the industry is gaining momentum, and this is very valuable. And this partnership has to be strengthened between governance, security, businesses, utilities, and consumer services in a large way if our geospatial technology is to be impacted upon on our people. Now, our economy today is estimated at 20,000 crores, and this has about 7,000 crores in exports. But this is an extraordinarily small amount for a country like India and the capabilities which we have. We may have about 250,000 professionals of various kinds and 50,000 professionals associated with government agencies, but we should really ramp up a lot more. Now, some of you argue that our policy may be restrictive and complex, and I would disagree with that in significant part. The policy is indeed complex, but at the heart of what we do with data, industry and government must work together in step to not only talk about market share or how our market can grow, but how our people share and how our people's welfare can grow. Unless these two go together, we will not be in sync. Government cannot talk about inclusive use of data, and industry cannot simultaneously talk about increasing market share as if these are at cross purposes. These are not. Market share is very tightly linked with the growth of impact on people. And for growth of impact on people, private sector and industry in general need to be to step up hugely. So that is really what I wanted to say. Our policy which we develop should be enabling, it should be transparent, it should work for the entire ecosystem, and at the heart of it, data should benefit everyone. This can be done in an inclusive manner, yet in a manner which is not throttling and top down. So we should need a comprehensive policy which the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Council has recommended, and this should include having an enabling and conducive environment for data creation. We should have, in terms of technology and hardware, a constellation of high-resolution Earth observation satellites with the opening up of partnerships between ISRO and industry. That's going to be increasingly feasible. Geospatial skills are very important, and that can be taken up very effectively by the National Skill Development Authority. And data-producing agencies, need to link up their data for public good in data.gov. That should be the preferred platform. So we should really have a group which develops this comprehensive policy. Your interactions are very important in the industry, recommending that to government, and there will be interface organizations in the government which will take this up really well. At the heart of this, again, I should stress are public-private partnerships. There's no question that they're vital. And as I said, with the opening up of mechanisms for partnerships between industry and ISRO, I think the door is open now for extraordinary progress in geospatial technologies of all kinds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insight and very words of wisdom when you talked about the value of geospatial information, sustainable development, economic growth, as well as taking care of comprehensivity of the public policy. And under your leadership, sir, the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Innovation Council has made 5-point recommendations for integrated geospatial policy environment, and they are very useful recommendations. And I hope that you will continue to provide your leadership to help this momentum gain more and more. So with this, I would like to thank you once again for taking time out and delivering your keynote address, which is very, very encouraging and inspiring for all of us. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking
Bye-bye.
time out. With this, we'd like to move to our first panel discussion, which is on geospatial infrastructure development through public-private partnership. As we know that infrastructure is at the core of any services, and geospatial infrastructure is at the core of the data economy, because spatial dimension serves as the foundation for all the data ecosystem, or rather I must say that is at the nervous system of the data ecosystem. I have a great pleasure to welcome our panelists, Mr. A.S. Kiran Kumar, former chairman ISRO and member of Space Commission, as well as the chair of the National Think Tank on Geospatial Strategy for New India. Lieutenant General Girish Kumar, Surveyor General of India, and Dr. V.V.R. Mohan Reddy, founder and executive chairman of Science Limited, one of the very successful geospatial companies, and is Padam Shri awardee, and that's a very pride for geospatial community. And Mr. K.K. Singh, one of the oldest geospatial companies in India, he founded Rollen Group, and he is leading that Rollen Group. So this is a wonderful panel which we have of the visionary leadership from the industry and the government. And I would like to invite all the panelists once again to the panel. I would like to initiate in this process that a brief comment, opening remarks by each one of you, and then we will take up some questions. May I go ahead and request General Girish Kumar to make his opening remarks?
Thank you very much, Sanjay. First of all, my sincere compliments to you and your team for organizing this virtual summit. Now coming to this development of the geospatial infrastructure by public-private partnership, and the recent announcement made by the Honorable Finance Minister, which you said in your opening remarks, is a very welcome step. And from Surveyor of India, we really heartily welcome this initiative taken by Government of India. This will allow Indian companies also to participate and launch their own satellites, and where we can really get online images for our many day-to-day applications. Not only it will eliminate the delaying process which we are depending on foreign satellites. So definitely I'm sure Indian companies will take this opportunity to take advantage and participate in this Earth observation system through public-private partnership. We also look at them providing us cloud-based services so that images can be made available in real time, whether we go for a change detection or crop management or urban management. There are thousands of applications. I need not to describe those applications, but definitely it is going to bring a new ecosystem and in the country, which will have socio-economic benefits also. As far as geospatial infrastructure is concerned, we in Surveyor of India, we are already trying to establish geodetic infrastructure in terms of planimetry and vertical. Now, as a national mapping agency, I feel that this is our mandate and the country requires this, because all other geospatial activities will depend on this infrastructure. So building on geospatial infrastructure and geospatial or vertical datum, it's a very critical component of any geospatial activity. We can think of public-private partnership also, and for that we need to identify few sectors where we can work with the public-private partnership model. And in fact, our roadmap for the country, based on the guidelines given by the Government of India, is also on the similar lines, because the requirements are huge, demand is very high, and we need to really provide any updated content also, whether it's geospatial information or applications or anything. If we adopt this kind of model within the framework of the Government of India, within the guidelines, it will be a very good initiative, and we are already thinking in these directions. Partly we are doing it with the industry, but that is on build, operate and transfer. But public-private partnership model, like we have in various highways and other infrastructure, this also we are working, and I'm sure very soon will be coming out some model of public-private partnership in geospatial technology. We need to identify sectors where we can really work with the industry and to form as a national strategy, and where this contribution from sectors which are really contributing to the GDP of the country, those sectors can be identified, and we'll be very happy to work with the industry to bring out any public-private partnership model. Thank you so much.
Kiran, would you like to share your opening remarks in this panel?
Good afternoon, Sanjay, and good afternoon to all of you. It's indeed a great pleasure to be part of this event. And as this geospatial industry related activities, if we look at today, data linked to location has become such an important aspect by virtue of the technological progress that has happened in observation, tremendous increase in human ability to observe from ground, drones, balloons, even satellites from various platforms of LEO, GEO, or even from other planets, etc. And then communication itself, which has made huge strides with fiber, Wi-Fi, or satellite-based applications. And then with the tremendous advancement in storage and computation that has happened, and the Moore's law making the electronics change at such a fast pace has all resulted in the ability to bring then using of geospatial information for planning, monitoring, and also even whether it is for weather prediction or healthcare or elections, dealing with navigational of migration of people, transport, then advertisement, and a host of things is all becoming very important. And economy of the country is so much dependent on the effective use of this geospatial technology and tools that are available. And here, while the COVID has really shown that what needs to be done, particularly in a very quick time, and it has to be done in such a fast pace, and government alone will not be in a position to handle the entire thing. And only when the private enterprise, which brings with it the huge amount of you can say efficiency, speed of doing things, and new investments, and when only the government as well as the private enterprises, they cooperate with each other and bring in synergy, will we be able to tackle the kind of problems that we are going to encounter, particularly post-COVID, where the entire humanity, it's almost like you have reset the thinking process and how to deal with it. And it is in this context that the increased collaborative efforts between private enterprise and government becomes more and more important. And then we have to find more effective ways of working with each other and bringing in synergy. And it's an appropriate time to discuss all these matters. And I should compliment Geospatial Media for making this happen, bringing together the various entities for a dialogue and looking at solutions, how to solve the problems for the country.
Kiran, thank you very much for your leadership also in the think tank reports and your projective recommendation for public-private partnership and working together in the time of need is very, very encouraging, because that's what all of us are looking at. So with this, I would like to move on to our third panelist, Dr. Mohan Reddy, who is a very well-known industrialist, but more than now he's known as social entrepreneur, and have been working with various top-level initiatives of the government of India. So, sir, your inputs as well as your guidance would be very, very useful in formulating this policy.
Thank you, Sanjay, and my greetings to all my fellow panelists. We've heard very well from Professor VijayRaghavan, Dr. Kiran, Kumar, General Girish, Kumar, all of them telling about the importance of geospatial infrastructure. At this point of time, as we, even before COVID came by, we all recognized the need for data how important data was becoming, and it became all pervasive. It was not just limited to any particular industry. It cut across every possible industry. And as I used to say for several years, and I continue to say, it's the human imagination which has become the limitation in terms of type of applications that the data could be put to. And that data is very important. And I think Prof. VijayRaghavan covered it very well. And certainly we believe that technology is racing at a much faster pace compared to what it was, especially the digital transformation that's happening around the world. So therefore, we got to make sure that digital transformation also gets into the benefit of the society in a much larger way, especially from the GIS perspective. We talked at length about the public-private partnership. I should be first clarify that the way in which public-private partnership, or PPP, it's called, or P3, is largely involvement of both of them very intensely into the same enterprise, same special purpose vehicle, and so on and so forth. That is, there is financial, there is an IP involvement, all of them are there. But when it comes to geospatial or geospatial infrastructure and the associated development, I do have some reservations about having a PPP model. PPP model in the traditional sense, that's both of them being involved together. Because if you go back, and there are at least about 6 or 8 sectors in which PPP has been extensively done in India, and there are about 1,000 projects, I believe. It's strangely that I did some research myself today, and I did have an opportunity to speak to people who've been very intensely involved in them. The outcomes are not very positive. So therefore, the question that comes up is, why PPP for geospatial infrastructure? Because the first and the foremost is, typically the PPP is done in case of large-scale projects. It's not. It cannot be done by a government because of fund challenges, etc. Even the private sector does not have the fund as a result. But you start bringing in the private sector primarily for their innovation, entrepreneurship, project management skills, etc. And the government gives them the right of way in making sure that they can implement it. So therefore, A, it has to be large. B, at the same time, we also think that the risks have to be clearly perceived, which means that the projects have to be extremely well defined. I'm not very sure in geospatial, or for that matter in the associated software industry, etc., where you can completely specify a project very extensively. And we find it extremely difficult in trying to talk to some of the stakeholders on issues relating to things like scope creep. They don't understand that. Or you keep saying, what's the real cost associated with it? So there are a number of issues that are there in terms of risks that are associated in implementing a geospatial project in the PPP model. So therefore, I have a long list of them, whether it's revenue predictability, etc. So therefore, I'll say why PPP for geospatial is my first. The second one is, how do we do this? I think General Girish Kumar said he had a few projects which are already in play with BOT, build, operate, and transfer. There are many other models that are also there in the PPP at this point of time. But all of these, we have also seen, have to be extremely long in terms of duration. And it has to be very high in terms of value. Otherwise, and then it has to be externally financed. So therefore, today, while two of the acquaintances of mine who have one of the largest exposure in this country today on the PPP model, did have a lot of grief, but they also felt that the grief is also being shared equally by the banking and the financial institutions. Now, therefore, their involvement becomes very important. And in this industry, it becomes challenging because there, in the traditional PPP model industry sectors I'm talking about, there's a fairly large amount of real assets which are there. Whereas it comes to our geospatial or the software or the technology-centric industry, the real assets won't be there for them to finance and fund them. So therefore, my third point I'd like to make is the third last point. What's the move forward strategy to me? move forward strategy to me is we can still demarcate what is there in the purview of the government and what has to be in the purview of the corporate or the business. And both of them can cooperate very well. Not necessarily they get into a model where they co-invest and co-work together, co-lead themselves. That I am not very sure. That maturity level, I think they're struggling with the brick and mortar industry, where it's been there for not years, for hundreds of years. Actually, PPP is new to India only for the last 20, 30 years, but all over the world it's been there. And several parts of the world it's been extremely successful. I'm sure all of us experienced that in several places, even in the West, where you're driving on a toll road, which obviously means it's a PPP model that's working at that point of time. So go-to-market strategy for me is that we distinguish between two of them. One is that let the infrastructure get created by the authorities, whoever is the authority you name them. But then we license that to the corporate world or the business, and the corporate world thereafter takes to add more amount of data to it if it's required, or applications on top of it. Both of them have to happen. But then the relationship between them is that they certainly have to give us accurate data, on-time data, continuously updated, and of course, in return, they get royalty associated with it. I think that's the model that I would say will work very well in the shorter term to medium term, before we get levels of maturity where we can start saying we can work hand in glove with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reddy, for providing such a comprehensive view of the definitions, purposes, factors influencing the P3. And this debate, Dr. Reddy, is actually going on around the world at this moment. In fact, the National Geospatial Advisory Committee of the United States has also set up a committee on the PPP, and they are, just by virtue of the fact that geospatial has been a service in the past and is trying to become an infrastructure which will be laying the foundation for autonomous world. Looking forward, there are a lot of investments likely happening into the infrastructure sector itself, especially in the field of positioning infrastructure on the ground. So yeah, but you presented such a comprehensive view, and I really appreciate that, and we have some more questions with you in the coming few more minutes. With this, I would like to go to Mr. K.K. Singh, who is the CEO and chairman of the Rollen Group, and has a plethora of experience in this business, and he's tried his hands to do something PPP almost 10, 15 years back, and have some experiences of offering the new PPP models at that time, but probably the majority was not as much within the government to listen to that. So, Mr. Singh, we are ready to listen to you.
Thank you, Sanjay, and good afternoon to all of you. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So before I give some of my thoughts on PPP and some of the ideas which Dr. Reddy very well articulated, I would like to give some background of where we are in terms of technologies today, so that we can understand exactly as to what PPP kind of thing can do, or what Dr. Reddy personally said, and it's very well said, should be the model. Internet penetration and proliferation of smartphones has led to awareness and daily use of spatial technologies and products by billions of people across the globe. This is leading to a growing demand for geospatial information and solutions, which in turn is resulting in an exponential increase of georeferenced data located on the cloud and social media platforms. Convergence and integration of geospatial technology with various information systems is playing a critical role in decision making and problem solving across wide spectrum. The most significant change in geospatial environment is not from any one single technology, but from a combination and interplay between multiple technologies like cloud, Internet of Things, big data, mobility, artificial intelligence, etc. It is now well accepted by industry and governments that embedding geospatial technologies in information modeling, analytics, and actionable intelligence has greatly increased the value and quality of decision making through enhanced visualization and locational analytics. The growing demands for geospatial information and solutions from consumers and enterprises has triggered the need for ready-to-use additional geospatial data, and digital mapping solutions which are specially enabled with advanced analytics. The developed world has already endorsed and created mechanisms to open up the geographic information to all critical sectors of the economy. In India, a political framework to encourage open use of geographic information, revision of archaic mapping regulations, and conducive environment for public-private partnership is urgently required to unleash the full potential of these technologies for double-digit growth of our GDP. With this background, what I would like to emphasize is that we are not at a stage where the geospatial industry technologies can be used for a particular project alone in a partnership mode. What is important is that the complete freedom is there in terms of innovation, creation of software packages, creation of data, and creation of products and solutions which can be utilized by multifarious agencies, not only in India but world over. Because any particular business model cannot be based on economy of just one country. So if a private enterprise has to spend $100 million and has to recover over a period of time, then it must be able to go around the world and do that. And so it has to use innovative technologies, which I just mentioned, which have analytics and big data and Internet of Things, and then combine the geospatial technology with that. But fundamentally, what is important is that the policies should be set. Today, we cannot do mapping. Today, we cannot do anything because the more or less everything is controlled by the government in terms of how that information can be taken with permissions and all that, which is not so in anywhere else in the world. And see the kind of use which developed world is making to geospatial technology, the kind of use it has. The example is, a very small example is a cockpit data. The cockpit data is something which is a very important thing. If you don't have the right cockpit data, billions of dollars worth of investment a country might make into the airplanes will be useless, because what is the data which goes into the cockpit enables the right use of the airplanes. And how to do that? I mean, it requires sometimes you got to do survey mapping and through satellite imageries, and then put a lot of software packages and then create that data by doing 50 or 25 million square kilometers of areas. So obviously, even today, the imagery for India is available outside nations, and we can take that and create that. But then that is not allowed for Indian use. So what I am trying to say is that we just need to open the policies and open them in a fashion that they can be freely utilized. Of course, restriction for the sensitive areas and other things are understood. They need to be kept in mind. But apart from that, just open it up. Whether a company wants to use it for the purpose of supporting homeland security or for purpose of security, supporting 911 type applications, or for defense, or for any other thing, it should be left to them. And I think I like to compare it with like a telecom revolution. I mean, just see when the telecom was just opened up for anybody to come inside, spectrum was sold, and then they have to just go and do it. And there was a revenue sharing of small kind which is there. And that is what exactly is the kind of thing which is required here. The more and more complex we make it, more and more difficult it will be, whether it is a PPP or anything else. It should be just made simple so that it becomes a simply available thing which can be done like any other, like in any other part of the world. So that is my simple thing. And of course, there are complex projects which may require PPP. And of course, PPP can be defined and then can be done in those things. But PPP alone will not work. It has to be a combination of PPP with the freedom to the industry to be able to do what they want to do, keeping in mind not only the Indian nation, but also the rest of the world, so that the demand can be met across the world of their products, so that the investments can come, which are the latest and the greatest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's very well said. That if the policy reforms are policies are conducive, the market will take care of rest of the things. So that's the kind of message I'm hearing from you. So after hearing four, very learned and experienced panelists, let's go into the discussion mode. And there is also a live poll which is going on with regard to what could be the preferred PPP business model. Some of those who are interested, they can share their views on that. And if you have any questions, you just put it in the chat box, and I will try to take them as well. And to begin with, after hearing this, it looks like that the industry feels that the PPP is something for which probably we will not get mature. But to come to that maturity level, we have to have more conducive business environment, and we have to have some, I think, more better policies. So let's go back to hear from Girish or Kiran Kumarji, that what is that which you think will drive, or what do you think that as a public sector organization, in serving the need of the national development through geospatial information, what is the critical factor in your mind? What's the key area at this moment we should, as a community, address?
Yeah. One of the key things what I feel basically is the approach of the government and the people in the government. One of the key things is building trust with the industry for two reasons. One is there is a significant amount of security aspects involved in the activity, and this security requirement poses very different constraints across the different departments of the government. There are some departments for which this security aspect is so much overriding that at times they are not in a position to relax anything. Now, this is one of the key things which makes a huge impact for the way the industry needs to actually carry on the activity and support. So one of the most important aspects which we need to work on and break the approach is how to make sure that the government and the industry actually gets into a mode of trust, and then both of them are comfortable in sharing such that the nation's requirements and nation's priority for certain things are not impacted. There are, of course, a large number of activities where this question need not come. But then today, by virtue of the thinking process that existed and the way the government was looking at the private industry itself for a long time during the last 6 to 7 decades, how it was looking at wealth creation as whether it is okay or not okay. So there were many problem areas. But what I believe is today, if you look at particularly after the way the COVID has made an impact in the country and across the globe, every government and every people who are running the systems are actually rethinking. Now they are looking at how their country's activity can be actually done in a reliant manner, where certain key things you don't have to depend on some other country. So there are a whole set of new thinking processes which are coming. And I believe this is an appropriate time for proper discussion to identify how we can work with each other. Like what Dr. Reddy pointed out is very correct. But in terms of when there's huge infrastructures are involved, if you are allowing the private industry a clear mandate, they can go ahead and do. But in the geospatial structure, you have got one data generation. Even in data generation, there is an opportunity for the private entities to generate the data required. And then beyond that, of course, using that data for various, whether it is a decision support system or finding solutions, which goes across the disciplines and in practically all areas. I think the real key is in identifying the mechanisms and then opening up the thought processes and building this trust between the industry and the government entities. And government definitely realizes that it cannot deliver today unless you allow the commercial activities and business activities to happen in business areas. So that part of it is clear, but then how it translates it into actual operation. This is where forums like this and discussion is supposed to help create a better scenario.
Thank you, Kiran. Trust is definitely a very important, asset or capital which we need to build up, for otherwise also, not only for PPP, but also as a national development, and the role of geospatial information trust is definitely very important. Quickly, we are very short of time, but then quickly, if Girish want to put something, some comments on top of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. A lot has already been said, and I fully agree with the comments and the concern shared by our two senior executives from the industry. All projects have to be very clearly defined, and geospatial is maturing in India, and I am sure in times to come it will definitely, we can move forward. I'll give you one small example, like in Survey of India, the new technology like a mobile LiDAR. Mobile LiDAR is coming up, and we talked to one or two industry colleagues, and they're ready to invest. So now we are working, we have already started working on that kind of model where they invest, we within the framework of the Government of India, within the guidelines of security agencies, we can create data set and we can share unclassified data so that we can get benefit. Commercialization of the data which has been generated can be done by him. Rest we continue to do that. So definitely the projects have to be very clearly defined, and so that, and it should be long term, what Dr. Reddy said. It should not be a short term project. I'm sure will be, a roadmap is also on the same lines. Thank you.
That you laid out a very clear picture that what is possible within the PP and what is not. That's great. But what do you think that the government should do fundamentally to let the entrepreneurship and the commercial sector in the field of geospatial harness and leverage this atmosphere?
One simple, straightforward thing, Sanjay. We need more people like Dr. Kiran Kumar and General Girish Kumar. Progressive thinking civil servants, not because both of them are in front of my eyes, I'm saying that. I honestly say this, sir. I think that is the biggest challenge that we have in this nation. And this is heard from just not them. Today, I happened to have a conference call with somebody else who used to head Commerce Department for a number of years and brought in sizable amount of reforms during his tenure. And he was saying the same thing, carrying forward that trust with the rest of the people is a key thing. Trust and control. We don't want to lose our control, and we don't trust the other people. So these two things are the ones which are making a big challenge for us. So long as we can probably start building, I feel at times very ashamed of myself because I do work which is a lot more security driven in countries like United States. I have on-site development centers where high security work is done by me, whereas people don't trust me the same way in my own country. So therefore, I think the trust and control is one. The second point, and last one that I wanted to make was that I think the COVID has made us learn several things. And digital transformation is one of them. Everything has become e-centric at this point of time. E-learning, e-shopping, or everything is e. Even interaction has become e. So this digital transformation will go a long way. And there's fairly good evidence at this point of time to say that people came out of the Great Depression of the 1930s using one word called industrialization. That is when you saw automobiles, that you saw energy, you saw manufacturing, you saw food processing, and so on and so forth. This time, this particular depression that you will see coming out of COVID, you'll see technology will play an extremely important role. Technology driven by data. So therefore, I like to emphasize that it's extremely important. There's urgency that we should get to this digital geospatial stuff too quickly to ensure that we also ride on this particular wave where we'll see technology riding on top of data for bringing about equality to everybody in the society.
And what you talked about is very, very key this moment. So, Mr. Singh, I leave you with the last word in this panel. So we talked about trust and progressive thinking. and technology innovation as the three key areas. So, what's your mantra for government and all of us to one mission statement which you want us to carry forward?
I think what Dr. Reddy said is very, very correct. I mean, trust, of course, is a fundamental issue. I'll give you one example, a live example. We were selected by the military for battlefield management system. This is one of the most advanced system in terms of network war centric system. And for that, we had to develop a lot of technologies, which we developed over a period of 3 or 4 years. But every time I would say that the military used to take us inside their domain, inside their places where exactly we used to know how exactly the military is working. And that is why we could do that. They were supervising it, they used to come and check it, they used to ensure, and we had tremendous amount of confidentiality agreements which were in place, and the whole system has been developed. And that's the system which is but the military has seen, checked, and understood. It's like a world-class system which only 3 or 4 countries in the world have. So the point is that anything can be done. Anything can be done by India today. The technology is here, the people are here. We are equipped with everything. When it comes to a PPP, like BMS is a PPP, it has to be something where deep involvement from the government or the military was required for conducting it. But on the other side, there are other 100,000 things which have to be done with the control on the sensitive areas, which can be left to the industry by just letting the policies be clear.
Basically, what we're talking about, the trust, progressive thinking, and innovation is something that is very key for us to move forward. I would like to just close the session because we have a very busy schedule of the day. I would like to thank all those people who have put the questions in the chat box, and we are not leaving them there. We will actually take those questions in our think tank meeting. They are very valuable questions to us. We have also seen a poll which was going on, what is the most preferred business model of PPP. And if it is talking about licensing of data and services model, which actually just kind of endorse the idea of what Dr. Vijayaraghavan Reddy and our industry friend K.K. Singh talked about, that we have to take the industry can play a key role into managing and taking that service or rolling out that service to the people, and that is the very good partnership model between the public-private sector, where the government focuses on key infrastructure and the industry is focusing on scalability and commercialization of that infrastructure for public use. With this, I would like to thank all my panelists. Kiran, sir, please stay because you are chairing the next session. So you stay in the green room, and then we'll restart our session in 30 seconds. And thank you very much to all the panelists.
Thank you very much.
Sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We had a great time and moving forward with the panel 2, which talks about geospatial sharing policies.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all the panelists. We have with us Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Advisor Policy, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Sri G. Narayanan, Chairman, Managing Director, New Space India Limited. We have Rakesh Verma, Chairman, MapMy India, and Chair, FICCI Geospatial Committee. Then we have Ajendra Kumar, President, ESRI India, and also Senior Vice President, Association of Geospatial Industries, India. Now, today, the topic that is there for our discussion is geospatial satellite data sharing policy, commercialization, and scalability of geospatial value in Indian economy and society. Now, it's quite clear that geospatial data and information plays a huge role in the country's economy and how it contributes to various activities. And we have also seen that even in times of COVID and post-COVID, there have been very significant requirements emerging out of this. Now, in the arena of handling this, there are three key parts. One is the data itself, data generation of data, and this generation of data, which requires many technologies coming both on ground and then off ground, and then this data to be converted into information, where along with the data a host of means, particularly when we talk of geospatial, each of this data linked to a particular location, and then based on our ability to store and process this data in the form of computing system, cloud systems, or otherwise, and then finally making this process data accessible to people who want to use it for planning, monitoring, or even for making decisions. So in all these areas, geospatial technology plays a big role. And one of the things we would like to look at in this particular forum is now, with respect to the EO data platforms, sharing of data, what are the issues, and then how we should go ahead. So I would request each of the panelists to initially make a few comments, a couple of minutes you can take, and give your views on this, and then we will get into specific discussion on the topic. We can start with Narayanan, Chairman, Managing Director, New Space India Limited, and then subsequently go to Akhilesh. Okay, Narayanan. Yeah, please go ahead, Narayanan.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Kiran Kumar, Chairman of this session, and other panelists and other audience joining us. I hope I'm audible to you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sufficient inputs had already been provided on the policy requirements, the trust generation requirements, and the other part of the infrastructure, the facilitation, the policy, and all those matters. When it comes to the past, when you look at the ISRO or the Department of Space that provided the required expertise as well as the kickstart and to sustain the geospatial industry in the country. And to a large extent, the policies of the government has also evolved in line with the demands from the industries. Needless to say, it is always the fact globally that technology always overtakes policy, and policy struggles to keep pace. Even today, when we go into various discussions, this is the situation that we face, and we all try to address that. With the growing demands from industries, several industries have been backed up and supported at the government levels also. Recently, the government of India has also formed this company, which I am heading today, the New Space India Limited, with a mandate to expand the reach of space research in the country and help commercial exploitation. When you come to the various initiatives that have been taken by the department, most of you will be aware that the Bhuvan Geospatial Platform is acting as the geospatial platform of India, with more than 60 terabyte of data in its storage, and free downloads being allowed without any questions for data up to 23.5 meters, and also visualization more or less on real time up to 1 meter capability. These things have helped considerably, and if you see the number of hits that has happened, the number of hits in the past have crossed more than 500 million, with over 1 million unique IPs addressing it. Average number of unique IPs who hit the site every day is more than 35,000. The noteworthy here is that even during the complete close down period, the data from the NRSC shows that there had been 13,000 hits in the month when the nation was in complete lockdown. So this is one of the platforms that has providing data. So of course, there are calls from the industry to further liberalize the things, and I'm sure the government will respond to that and will take a call on that in the days to come. Another initiative that has done to generate the capacity building in the country is the Vedas initiative of the Space Application Center, where the platform to motivate young researchers and academia to showcase their spatio-temporal analytical skills using Indian Earth observation data and build geospatial applications is on, and several people, even during the very short period of its existence, there had been good response to that, and several people have benefited by it. So specialized training is also provided as a part of this initiative under Vedas under the title Trees. Another initiative that provides acts as the storehouse of data for meteorological and oceanographic data is the MOSDAC, hosted by the Space Application Center again, where the data from 8 Indian satellites are provided on for people to access, as well as the analyze, and also with the real-time for nowcasting facility and other things, as well as for the fishermen and the data provided to them and all those things. One specific point on the Vedas is that it effectively utilizes the artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities built into the system, so that the users are benefited by the recent advances in technologies also to make use of this. The recent operationalization of the NAVIC system has also added a lot of value into the system, and the synergetic applications using NAVIC and Earth observation are today making a big inroads into the total activity of the country. Coming to another outreach facility that has been established at Hyderabad by NRSC, which helps in the total facility and data are made available on platforms on the real-time interaction with NRSC Hyderabad for knowledge sharing, training, for academia partnership, as well as industry collaboration. These are also helping many of the industrialists and academicians in a big way. As was mentioned by the chair, the support during the COVID situation is also noteworthy. The COVID-19 dashboard in sync with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the citizen reporting system and officer reporting of the Department of Health, Government of Telangana, the mobile Ritu Bazaar tracking for ensuring the vegetable supply to all the affected areas, again by the Government of Telangana, the home quarantine tracker by the Government of Telangana, the Bihar Health Department containment strategy, the Annapurna meal scheme of the Government of Telangana, and the Amma Unavagam program of the Government of Tamil Nadu are all standing examples of how this technology has helped during the recent COVID situation, and it is continuing to. Now coming to the future, as has been told, the private sector will have a major role to play. They will have to come in with the industry investment, the supply chain management, and also in that process will generate considerable amount of employment. This will be required to be supported by the infrastructure, the policies and guidelines, the enabling strong interface, and the conducive regulatory climate by the government. The regulatory mechanism should be enticing to the industries so that they willingly come forward and take up the thing and take up the activities and contribute. It should not be a restrictive mechanism, and I'm sure the present policies of the present government are very well tuned to that and will take that thing forward. Of course, apart from academia and from government and private sector, the academia also will have to pitch in with the skill development as well as the research and development initiatives, and I'm sure that will also happen on real time. This summarizes my views on this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Narayanan, for that from you. Now, if Akhilesh Gupta is ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me first, I think, at the outset, thank Geospatial Media and Communication, and especially Sanjay for having invited me to speak. I am not even distantly connected to this field, but I have one responsibility in the Department of Science and Technology, and that is being as head of the policy research cell of the DST to formulate India's geospatial policy. So I would be very brief. So let me emphasize, I think all of you already know, but let me reiterate that so much advancement in geospatial technologies and the use of geospatial data has taken place. Not only the data, but product, services, and all solutions. So, and therefore, we need to have, there is a certain urgent need that we must bring out a national geospatial policy to empower the entire ecosystem of the geospatial data infrastructure development, and also should be able to address the needs from the development and the especially the economic and the other development needs. The DDPSS is very important in the context of national development, and we know that it has very important relevance in the context of both contemporaries and emerging technologies. And I don't need to elaborate those things, but it covers all surveying, remote sensing, photometric geodesy, hydrography, and all kind of technology-related issues. And therefore, in order to address the ever-increasing importance of geospatial information that country is expending, it necessitates that we must have appropriate guidelines in terms of national policy to ensure data creation, processing, standardization, maintenance, management, accessibility, and so on. Now, a large number of policies and the law and rules exist in the country. Many such things like we had National Security Act 1980, we had National Map Policy 2005, we had Civil Aviation Requirement 2012 and 18, Remote Sensing Data Policy, National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy, and so on. So these all exist, all tools that are required to facilitate the national data policy, national geospatial policy, that do exist, in some form. What is now required that you must create a harmonization of all these available policies, act, laws in the context of geospatial domain, and bring out an overarching, inclusive, I would say, bottom-up and more comprehensive policy framework to facilitate and empower every citizen in the country to access and use our geospatial data. Now, DST took initiative some time back to formulate this policy. We did set up committee, expert committee, and later on another advisory committee to finalize the draft. The draft was finalized. It was also circulated in a limited way. But I think now the time has come that we need to dust out that draft that he had and rework on that. And before go further, organize a more extensive stakeholder consultation, especially covering all industrial stakeholders and partners, public at large, and the users of all time. We already, in fact, we propose right now DST is engaged in formulating the National Science and Technology Innovation Policy. I think once that gets slightly matured, I mean, we are hoping that the actions are already very intensively taken up that in that context. I think my sense is that maybe in a matter of a month or a half, we will be able to start working on this NGP draft NGP. And so I think, in fact, I already said, Sanjay, that we are very keen to take this forward. It is very much required in the national interest, and we are also kind of keen to work on it. So all a multi-stakeholder consultation is being planned, and we will come back with a detailed plan, and not only just consultation, but also going little more extensively going for the feedback, also the survey and many other tools that we use, and also social media survey, etc. So we, in fact, and I look forward to having your suggestion for this. I think I conclude when I say that I take this opportunity, in fact, to invite all the stakeholders to participate in this process and for formulating a very forward-looking NGP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Akhilesh, for that. And in fact, this also brings to the fore one of the questions that is going to be being posed to the participants. Should data collected through public funding or taxpayers' money be sold for use to private sector or civil society? 1A, all data should be available free. B, certain restrictions, resolution and scale only should be free and rest can be sold. Probably some answer is expected from all the participants. In fact, this is one of the key things where data is generated from a large number of government funded projects, how they should be made accessible. Now, I would request Rakesh Verma, Chairman MapMy India, and also the Chair of FICCI Geospatial Committee India, to share his views on the data sharing policy, commercialization, and scalability aspect, his perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran Kumar, for helping us understand the basics which you said in the beginning itself about the data generation leading to processing and sharing of that. And I would also like to thank Sanjay for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'll start my thought process by asking a very fundamental question. I'm asking it to myself, sharing with you all, that in the today's world of the technology, which we all know, I don't have to describe it, have we understood what map is? If we understand what map is, then the question related to when we used to talk about 25 years back when I got into this was, okay, we make the maps, it takes me years to make a map for a city, it takes years to update it and things like that. in today's world, what's happening? In a fraction of a second, a map gets created, maybe whatever that area is, using the technologies which ISRO provides from off the ground, from the sky, and people like us doing it on the ground. Using the technology like mobile phone or any technology, UAV, whatever you talk, those technologies make it possible for the map creation again in a flash of a second. We call data generation, that's what happened in that second. We call it data processing or processing that data, that also happens in the fraction of a second. And the user also uses it in the same second. Now, whenever we are talking about any policy, my question comes up is, should we not look at this reality that this is what map is happening, this is what is happening to the map of today. So with this, keeping this in mind, the talk about sharing of the data. Now, when we talk about sharing of the data, and the questions have also come up here, whether the data that is shared, that comes from public funding or taxpayers, I'm happy. It is not talking about from the funds that the industries on their own invest. So if it is coming from funding or taxpayers' money, certainly I will say, why shouldn't it be shared with all the stakeholders at large, eliminating the part that is required for the security reasons. Now, again, what the private sector, I speak on behalf of private sector only, what the private sector can share is, if I take MapMyIndia is sharing the data in a big way. When you think of mapmyindia.com portal or Move Maps, and also sharing the data during this COVID time, we were probably the first one to start creating the COVID dashboard for public consumption through the app. I think it happened in 2-3 days time. The first person who requested us to participate with them was Karnataka only, where we tried to geocode all those testing centers and other things. So sharing of the data when we are talking about, and private-public partnership is the next topic. I wanted to say a few things. Should the public sector compete with private sector? Can't there be a very good clarity about where the public sector should be getting into geospatial and where the private sector should be? Because in any case, the country's resources are limited, whether it is in the hands of the government or private sector. Should the public sector and private sector collaborate? We talk about PPE, private-public partnership. Now, I think in the previous session, Mr. Reddy really talked very well about what is that partnership. Is that build, operate? Because these are not really the large projects. So even I believe that it should be a collaboration. Collaboration of what kind? Things that exist. Why not use it again? What's the point of reinventing it? It might be available in the private sector. It might be available in the public sector. So that kind of a sharing is also very interesting and important, whether it is for money or no money. Then we talk about also the speed. I think, sir, you talked about the speed. You talked about the new way of doing things. I think in this, our great country, every day the entrepreneurs are coming up. I'm not saying only entrepreneurs. I'm talking about whether people are working in the government or private sector. We Indians are coming up with great new way of doing things. The only issue is, if you come up with a new way of doing things, can you get it out? Can people start using it right away? And that's the kind of encouragement or a public-private partnership, if you call that as a public-private partnership, where such things are encouraged and given due value in terms of saying that, yes, do it, like we got it in Corona time, COVID-19. We were encouraged by at least 10, 20 different government organizations, whether from DRDO or even the PSA or from so many other government agencies, that please continue doing it. because we were doing a public service. So with this, I don't think, I'm sure Sanjay must be looking at his clock also. So I have to voluntarily end my part and let it continue with that. Thanks to everybody for letting me speak in this great seminar.
My apologies because I have to start at 5:30 the international component.
Just 1 minute for Rakesh Verma. Maybe you'd request.
We have again react. We have again, sir.
No, I said thank you.
Agendra is on mute.
Agendra is on mute.
We are not able to hear you.
Now it's okay.
Now it's okay.
So one challenge is that when you are the last one speaking, the time is always less. But nevertheless, I would still like to thank Mr. Kiran Kumar for hosting this session and this opportunity, and also to Geospatial Media for organizing this program, and to Sanjay as well. For two things, to Sanjay, one is that for organizing this event, and second is for forming the title of this session. It took me some time to understand from where it starts and where it ends. Geospatial and satellite data sharing policy, commercialization and scalability of geospatial value in Indian economy and society. मतलब पूरा ब्रह्मांड कवर कर लिया आपने इसके अंदर. So
geospatial.
So I will just make a few points because a lot of things have already been spoken, and Mr. Verma. My views are some of my views are very similar to what Mr. Verma just presented. So I strongly believe that geospatial and remote sensing data is important in all aspects of economy. Today we see that every government department, every government program, whether it's Digital India or Swachh Bharat or Smart Cities or Amrita, and you name any program, geospatial technology is playing a huge role there. The economic value it can create through better decision making and better program implementation also brings a lot of transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness. So that's a real plus point. And once you do things faster, the projects don't get delayed and things are done in a good manner. That also adds to the economic value which is being created. Coming to the sharing part, I would like to suggest that there should be platforms in today's world. Preferably those platforms should be online, cloud platforms, things like that. Whether it can be in both government domain as well as private sector domain, so that whatever data is being created and whatever the creator believes should be shared, actually get shared in a very easy online method, so that the red tape, the paperwork, the permission, all that goes away. And once you start sharing that data, duplication of effort is avoided because you search if data is available somewhere, don't have to worry about creation, and also recreation efforts and all those things are not really required. Whether this is offered free of cost or whether money is charged, that's something which can be looked at by the people who are creating, depending on the amount of money they spend and the economic value it creates. Government may decide to share information, share data with private sector, because even though a lot of money has been spent in creating, because by using that data, if private sector can make use in their enterprises or their projects or their program, the economic value generated will probably far exceed the money which was spent in creating that data. So I think those are some of the things which I would like to say because I was given a minute. So my suggestion here is that data sharing should become very easy and transparent, and it should be freely done. Government has an open data platform, gov.in. I think a lot of some data has come on that, but there's a potential to bring a lot more data on such platforms. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And since we do not have much time, I'll just make a summary. And basically today what we are looking at is how we need to enable the country to make use of this geospatial technology to go forward. The key thing is to reduce the number of restrictions and make the more and more things available. The less the restrictions that are put is important. And here is where the basic issue of grappling with security and usage comes into picture. And I'm sure more and more discussions like this, and what Dr. Akhilesh was telling, that how the policy brings out needs discussion among the stakeholders. And if we are in the government able to reduce the number of restrictions and make the data available to the industry, the country will go a long way in making use of it, not only for our own use, but we will also be probably the front runners of usage of such things across the globe. So let me wish Geospatial Media a big success in its efforts, and the country in its efforts to make use of geospatial technology for the future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kiran, for moderating this session. It is a very important session, and the crux of the matter is that we need to have an open and free access of data, and we have to encourage and utilize that data for societal and economic development. The speakers, thanks very much once again to each one of you. We are continuing with the session. We'll take a 5 minutes break. But I just wanted to assure you that this is the first attempt to delegates as well. This is the first attempt to do a virtual summit, and we want to make it more productive and more useful in coming times. But this debate on the public policy and the commercialization, industrial policy will continue, and we will like to play our constructive role in helping the government and helping ourselves to make a good policy. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you.
So I have extreme pleasure to welcome Rob Velde, my friend from Holland, who is kindly agreed to share this session, along with Thalia Barveld, who is the Director of Geospatial Commission UK. She just released a geospatial strategy day before. We have been just talking about that all over the world. And we have Boon Khai, who is the CEO of Singapore Land Authority, extremely dynamic and positive leader. We go ahead with Thalia to present.
Thanks for inviting me to speak. Hopefully this will be a really interesting topic, and it's really fortuitous timing, as Sanjay says, because the UK published its location strategy a couple of days ago. This is following recognition from the UK government that although geospatial data and actually the UK's capability and expertise is fairly strong, policy for it resides in lots of different locations and agencies and organisations in the public sector in the UK. So a couple of years ago, the UK government set up the Geospatial Commission, which I lead, and tasked us to work with others to collaborate on a set of policy priorities that would inform the UK's location strategy, which we published yesterday. So in the next couple of minutes, I was just going to an overview of the components of the location strategy. And then I was going to pull out for us, so we can have a more interesting conversation potentially about it, the different considerations for geospatial data access and sharing data. So before I go into that, here's our strategy on a page. The strategy that the UK has looks to improve geospatial data across the UK to benefit a range of different sectors. And some of those are outlined in the middle of this page. We have decided to prioritize 4 different categories of activity, 4 different missions. The first one of those is around promoting and safeguarding the use of location data. So, for example, really relevant considerations around privacy, ethics, security, how you value geospatial data and investment in improving that, for example, come under the first mission. The second mission, we focus on opportunities to scale and realize the value through improving data by testing specific use cases in different sectors. For example, we're investing in a prototype digital platform to have a look at in one place in the UK. building and buying can be brought together to make that market work more efficiently. The third mission, we focus on enhancing different skills and capabilities, given the huge interest in the use of geospatial data and the bleed into data science more broadly. And the fourth mission, we are really interested in the innovation opportunities for scaling some of the high value commercial uses of geospatial data where technology is advancing fairly fast. So I just wanted to, so the strategy is fairly dense, and I just wanted to pull out some potentially interesting topics for how we get to do that. The first thing to say is that the things that we have prioritized around data sharing and access are informed by a couple of different considerations. So one set of considerations is around the size of the prize. So it's really important for us when we are approaching a coordinated strategy to choose our priorities carefully. And those are informed by not only the value of doing those to the UK economy, but also costs of doing where things are difficult, technically feasible, where there are either technological reforms necessary or legislative reforms. So the trade-offs between those two things. The other set of considerations we're really interested in around sensitivities of making the data available. So, for example, where data is secure, or the security implications for making that available. So factoring those kinds of considerations in, then, we have lent into 3 different kinds of activities where data resides in different places, or it's not available at all at the moment. And I think this might be more interesting for us to pick up later. The first is where public sector, so for example, where geospatial data resides across different areas of the public sector and in different agencies. What we've done is we have started some projects and are thinking about ways of getting further into things like mandation of standards, or actively bringing together data through collective purchase or licensing agreements, or investments to upgrade legacy platforms that bring together data that sits in different areas of the public sector. So through our strategy, we're actively testing whether we can make some data improvements through those means and mechanisms. The second set of kind of interesting areas for us is where data resides in the private sector. So where there's no lever or potentially case to mandate access to private sector data. And so what we focus on and collaborate, where public and private sector entities can come together and create a mechanism or and navigating through things like commercial interests and security interests to get to a workable position there. And the third set of things that we're starting to test is where the data that we might want to use, for example, Earth observation data at the burgeoning space data and Earth observation data markets. So where technology is advancing to make data more available or improve that data. So how we can best stimulate markets through things like, for example, pulling together the public sector's buying power to make it worth investing in that kind of data from a private sector perspective. So that's just a quick through of some of the things in the UK strategy. You can find it on the Geospatial Commission's website in the UK, and some of those considerations might be relevant for the broader conversations that you've already been having today.
Thank you, Talia, for your inspiring talk. I would like to take a few minutes to give an overview of, let's say, the Dutch strategy. The Dutch strategy was launched about 10 years ago. And with a number of adjustments, it is still valid, you could say. This strategy consists of 3 parts. The first part is to go for a system of authentic data registers, which are guaranteed by the government. And these guarantees concern timeliness, quality, and legal anchoring. And the use of this data from these registers is mandatory for government action. For instance, when a developer would bring forward a plan for housing or infrastructure, it should be based on these mandatory key registers. But also when determining the tax on real estate. And currently, the following authentic registers are fully operational: addresses, buildings, cadastral rights, property taxes, topography, and infrastructure. And the authentic register of data on the subsurface, infrastructure, soil, groundwater, geothermal energy, geology, geophysics, and natural resources will be completed in 2021 and will be legally required. So that's the first cornerstone of the strategy. The second one is to go for open data and open standards as far as possible, in order to make the use of the registers as easy as possible, as widespread as possible. And that has been achieved with one exception. That's the exception of the data on cadastral rights. But all other data are available to everyone for free of charge, for free of any restriction for use. And access is guaranteed by a national portal. And the data is made available to market parties, to companies, to knowledge institutes, to universities in various forms via open standards. And there is now a large ecosystem of market players, developers who develop day by day services with this data. The third cornerstone of the strategy is a strategic cooperation between the government, the corporate sector, and knowledge institutes. And this cooperation, which has been built up in the past 5-6 years, is driven by societal issues. So what we do, we start with what are the current issues in society. Very recently, that was the reason obvious, the COVID-19 issue. So what happened that in a few months, 2 months ago it started, they were set up a sort of laboratory, test beds, but also day-to-day working together between the government and the private sector to develop tools, to develop applications, in this case, to serve this societal issue. Other societal issues which has been used for strategic corporations are the greening of the economy and a large government program to go for 100% digital supported system of permitting for the Environmental Act. So these are the three cornerstones of the strategy, which are still valid. You could say that there are two more things on the horizon, which will be in the focus area of the government and the private sector. One thing is that we see that there's a lot of more and more private data coming onto the market, where for public use, the public, let's say, the value of this private data is tremendous. A good example again for this is the COVID-19 actions, where this issue of location of people who are collected, for instance, by telecom providers or by the big platforms, became so crucial for the government to manage this issue. So finding out new ways to collaborate between the private and the public sector on data who has a big value for society. The second thing is that this concept of a geospatial infrastructure will evolve into what is more and more used as the digital twin concept. The digital twin concept where data, but also models and relations are used to simulate what will be the case. So these two things will be, I think, topics for the next version of the Dutch strategy. So these were my opening remarks. Talia, thank you that you already gave your picks. Mr. and colleague Boon Kai, please, could you give your picture? Sorry for the hesitation. Give your picture about the situation in your country. Thank you.
Hi, Sanjay, Rob. Thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to commend really the strategies of both the UK and the Dutch. I think both strategies are very good, and I think there's much that Singapore can learn. In particular, I think the UK has a very comprehensive strategy to unlock the data, which, as I understand it previously, resides in different areas. But now I think it looks like it is quite possible to harness much of the data and also to extract more value out of it. Perhaps just let me quickly go into the Singapore strategy that we have, which we developed a couple of years ago, and it was launched in 2018. Our emphasis in the Singapore geospatial strategy is not so much of unlocking the value of the data there is, but rather unlocking the value of the entire geospatial ecosystem in Singapore, as well as possibly around the region. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. We have spent, I suppose, the better part of the last decade looking at data that we have in Singapore in its current form. And one of the things that we have also realized, like many of you have pointed out, is that data from the public sector, while relevant, sometimes may not be as useful for the private sector. So our strategy is really aimed at coming together with the private sector to harness those data onto platforms and onto use cases, which is why you see that in the second limb, there's a pillar which talks about a thriving geospatial geo industry. But that can never happen if you don't have a government which places emphasis on geospatial, or which trains people well for geospatial and for geospatial, as well as having depth in geospatial and data. And for that, the other two limbs that we concentrate on in our strategy is really to have what we call a geospat government, where there is a trusted public service, trusted government, which is data-driven, and also a geo-empowered people, where we put in effort not only to develop, public service officers, government servants, but also the private sectors. And each of the parts that you see, we have set up mechanisms, we have set up strategies to be able to work through some of these issues. So, for example, if I can go to the next slide, you will see that we have created what we call GeoWorks. GeoWorks is really, at its core, a government-enabled but industry-led public and private sector-driven ecosystem. So what we mean is that we recognize that in order to galvanize, or in order to unlock the value of the entire ecosystem, you not only need the government playing a participant role, but you also need the government being an enabler role. And this is where we have set up a place funded internally by the Singapore Land Authority, but working with industry players, both big and small. Big players could include many of those that you're familiar with, Esri, Trimble, Hexagon, and also the small startups, to find use cases, to look at what geospatial can do or geospatial should do. We know that the value of geospatial is probably quite undervalued in today. Many people take it for granted. We know also that there's much more opportunity for collaboration. So this is really the effort to try to put together the entire industry in one place to be able to look at how better to fulfill certain common objectives. But you can never do that without knowing what your capabilities are. And this is where our second strategy is, really to have a geospatial capability, which not only strengthens what we have in the public sector, but also to continue to build in that sense. And one of the key things that we want to do here is to continue to develop the next generation of geospatial leaders. We have not only modular courses, but we have specialist courses in order to be able to harness the interest, not only of the young, but also of the mid-careers, that they can then consider geospatial as an alternative career, go deep into it, and subsequently come out much better, not only with their experience previously in whatever industries they're in, but forming those industries around geospatial. The last one is really, I think, how we look at the entire data structure ecosystem, both within the public and the private sector. And in this, one of the key parts that we want to be able to articulate is the fact that trust is key amongst collection and maintenance of that data set. We know today that there are privacy concerns. As much as we want to perhaps use much of the data that is out there, but we also face some challenges. One example now, as many of countries are facing, is contact tracing during the COVID situation. What type of data do we collect? What type of geolocation data do we collect? How do we keep those data? How do we store those data? So what we have effectively done is to set up a geospatial trusted center, which is managed by the Singapore Land Authority together with the Government Data Office, and to basically provide a one-stop access to quality geospatial data. Now, with that, then there is some confidence that this data set will be clean, this data sets will be consistent, and there will be mechanisms around these data sets to make sure that it is well protected and private. And with that, some of the data sets may eventually flow out into the private sector. So what we are currently doing is also to develop a public service 3D one map, which is essentially our 3D version of a previous government map that we've put out. And through this one map, we'll be able to proliferate more data into the private sector for not only just businesses, but for everyone, including public citizens, to be able to use and enjoy. So in a sense, I sort of like given a quick nutshell of how we intend to bring the entire ecosystem together. So it's not only just data, but it includes the players, it includes private and public sectors, and it also includes the development of people who not only appreciate but understand how to use geospatial data. I think that there is a lot of exciting work that we can do in this area. COVID obviously has thrown up many new interesting issues, but I think it has also given a sense that some data ought to be more protected than others. And I think going forward, there will be a lot of discussions, not only between industry players, but also with other governments. And Rob, I obviously be very interested to hear about how the Dutch government is using geospatial data to help solve COVID issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you very much for, again, your very comprehensive strategy, which has, let's say, the richness of all the aspects that you try to reach. That brings me to two questions, if I'm allowed. One thing is, when you look at this and you look at the progress you made in the past 2 years, what would you say? What was the most, let's say, essential thing you put in place? What was the measure that gave you the largest success? And again, as you said, I'm also really interested in, can you prove now in a situation of a crisis of COVID-19 that some of the things you had in your mind really worked out? Can you give some examples about the success of your strategy?
I think we learn more about the failures than the success. But I come back to this. The first thing that we have discovered really is that we have probably over the years undervalued the significance of geospatial, and I think COVID is a clear example. For so many applications today, geospatial is really not at the forefront, right? You look at wayfinding apps, you look at delivery apps, and so on. People take it for granted that geospatial is always going to be there, but it is a lot of work to collect the data, to make sure that the data is accurate, to make sure that the data is up to date, and also to make sure that the data is presented, or the maps are presented in a form which is easy to understand. It's a huge amount of work. But what we've also come to realize is that it is now an indispensable part of everyday lives. It sits at the core of, I think, what many cities and what many countries are trying to do with smart cities. And more importantly, I think it illustrates that there is a lot of scope for different countries to share their experiences, to find out what is the best out there. So things like open standards, interoperability, common platforms that people can ride on, right? And it also gives an opportunity for the private sectors, the private players, the big players, people like SG and so on, to work with the governments, right? To be able to come together and say, look, I've got this. You don't have to develop the platform, but can we work together to come up with a more comprehensive data set, a more comprehensive platform? And I think these are very interesting questions that we can answer. In the past, I've always said, the world takes a view that the private sector does their own, the government always does their own things, and we don't share. But I think now and more, we are seeing this. We recently decided to open up more data, 3D data in a sandbox, and it's great, right? We put together all the different big players, Hexagon, Trimble, SG side by side, and not only do they look at their own platforms, they look at each other's platforms, and I think the world is much richer for it. They sort of learn from each other, and I think this is the collaborative type of system that we want.
Maybe you now also give an answer to my first question. I think that you have achieved something like a culture or an atmosphere where collaboration is key and is accepted. So that's probably the most important thing you achieve.
I think many companies today realize that you gain more out of sharing and collaboration rather than just going it alone. Knowledge is no longer in a single person's domain. Right, you gain so much more wisdom, you gain so much more knowledge, and I think hearing earlier some of the presentations, I think this is really something that we should push ahead through.
Sanjay, we are now near at the time of the end of the session, and I saw that Talia Baldwin, that she is not any longer on the session. So I leave it to you.
Thank you, Rob. But Talia had some issues. She left. But it's pretty great. What we heard. I would like to summarize and probably have a question. I still have 2-3 more minutes to. Rob, tell me that what is something which actually drives the Dutch strategy to be so open, so free, and then what you use the term access is guaranteed. What do you mean by access is guaranteed?
Yeah, that was one of the design principles probably 5-6 years ago, when this key registers, this authentic registers became policy. And when you say on the one hand that there's an obligation to use this authentic data for decision making, then you have the obligation to make it as accessible as possible. Otherwise, you have an obligation which your citizen cannot fulfill, and that was the reason behind a policy decision to make the data as open, and open means no restriction for use, and also using internationally adopted open standards as much as they are available, became the strategy. And that brought us to, as you can also see in the situation in Singapore, to a one-stop portal where there was a lot of traffic, and the traffic means that people can access the data, but also can reuse the data using APIs, using technology, and this together makes that there is. When you asked it to the companies in the Netherlands, but you should ask it, that there are no restrictions. There are no restrictions to use. And there are only a few exceptions. And one of the exceptions I mentioned is the exception of the data on the deeds from the cadastre. And because there's another business model. But that's really an exception. All the other data is open for free.
So thanks. What I could hear from all the three experiences from Holland, UK, and Singapore is that the government has a mandate to provide fundamental geospatial data, as well as also make sure that it is freely available and utilized by the people. What I would also really like what Boon Khai said that it's the responsibility of the Singapore Land Authority to make geospatial data at the heart of digital government. It is the responsibility of the agency itself to be so proactive to convince the government to make use of the data. So thank you very much, all panelists, and thanks, Rob, for sharing this session and also sharing your experiences. Thank you very much, Boon Khai, and thanks to Thalia, who is not in the call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
With this, we go to our next session. Welcome back. We have been having great discussions so far. We move forward to the next session, which is focusing on India as a destination for geospatial business opportunities and challenges for global companies. And we have the pleasure of hosting the global companies and their vice presidents taking care of Indian and South Asian markets. And we also have Mr. Rajesh Mathur, who has probably 3 decades of experience of GIS and geospatial business in India, and well-known leader and advisor to Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Rajesh, I'm handing over the session to you, and we have about 6 to 27 minutes.
Thanks, Sanjay, and welcome to the session. We have 3 very eminent speakers in this session. There's Tanimira Kolewa, Vice President, General Manager, Asia Pacific, Head Technologies, Singapore. Rajan Iyer, Vice President and Managing Director, Trimil Asia and President, AGI, Association of Geospatial Industries. And VijayRaghavan, Vice President and Managing Director, Asia Pacific for Maxer Technologies, based out of Singapore. Before I invite the speakers to share their perspectives and give their remarks, I'll just share a few thoughts with you. Before that, I want to make a confession. I suffer from stage fright. Whenever I take the stage, people get frightened that I won't leave it easily. But don't worry. This is the virtual conference and there's no stage over here. Okay, so as Sanjay mentioned, I've been in this industry for 30 years here in India, seen the industry grow from what it was back in early 90s to where it is today. And without hesitation, I can say that this is probably the most exciting time of my geospatial industry career. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, the kind of technology innovation that we've seen in this industry over the last few years is unprecedented. High resolution satellite imagery, LiDAR technology, drones as source of data capture, integration with emerging tech, well, no longer emerging now, IoT, AI, machine learning, augmented reality, and several other developments, new platforms like cloud, big data analytic capabilities, and so on. They are creating opportunity that didn't exist earlier, an opening market that we never conceptualized would be there for geospatial technology. As was mentioned earlier today, the geospatial industry in India is growing at the rate of some 15%. And I have no doubt that it has a potential to go to 20, maybe 25%, as was mentioned by Sanjay earlier today. We require the right kind of policy, the right kind of frameworks, and of course, the right kind of skilled people. One of the on the other side, I see the market growing rapidly. Of course, in the current situation, COVID has caused a bit of a setback, but I no doubt this will be behind us in the next few months. Talking of COVID, I want to talk about something I learned only yesterday. I was at another conference organized by CII, Confederation of Indian Industries, and the topic was how integrated command control centers developed as part of Smart City program have been used by the cities to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. There were 6 speakers, including yours truly. Out of 6, 4 speakers specifically mentioned geospatial as an enabling technology, which helped them in evolving the right strategies and executing them to deal with the pandemic crisis they are facing. There was a talk about contact tracing earlier, I think by the Chief Executive of Singapore Land Authority. One of the cities in Western India is already doing it. They use geospatial or GI specifically to trace, to do the contact tracing to figure out who all were infected by a positive case identified by them. Of course, it's also created a high awareness of geospatial technology in the healthcare community, which has opened up new market that didn't exist earlier, at least at the scale that is feasible today. There are other opportunities in India, other markets like smart cities in itself, Amrut project, infrastructure projects, utilities and the likes, and of course, new applications identifiable for technology. Yes, there are challenges. Some of it were talked about earlier today. The policies is one challenge. The issue of a viable public-private partnership model is another challenge that we have to deal with. However, I'm sure these challenges can be dealt with, and with the right kind of policy framework and technology that we already have, I guess we can really grow the market to an absolutely different level. With that, I would like to invite the first speaker, Stanley Mira, to share her views.
Thank you very much. I represent here Here Technologies, which is among the top 3 providers of digital maps with coverage around the world. It's my pleasure to join the panel. And why the subject of India as a direction for geospatial is so close to my heart is India itself is a very important part of our business. We have close to 40% of our worldwide employee base out of India. And this is where we host our global mapping operations, as well as the majority of our data engineering effort, which is a great experience. Obviously, it's a pride for me here in the region to make sure that India is such an important part of the business. But I also see endless opportunities for, produced in India for India as well, because I also believe that in geospatial, if we can crack the code in India, we probably can crack it anywhere. There are so many opportunities, some challenges, but we see India as a great base for us. We have a fully owned India entity and run a number of initiatives to help growing talent for the industry. We have partnerships with universities. We drive some industry-wide initiatives. We are part of it. And as you said, I'd love to see that geospatial moves to a different place. I personally came to this industry fairly recently. I actually joined from the ICT side of the industry. But now I see a great marriage of capabilities between what GIS traditionally built and the great enhancements that technology like cloud and big data analytics, machine learning, blockchain, all these new technologies that are coming and creating unprecedented opportunities to innovate and achieve very different level of productivity. And of course, we know data is the cornerstone of what geospatial produces. And I would agree with the previous speakers that essentially this COVID-19 situation finally actually brought to a great focus what geospatial actually can deliver in terms of real outcomes around keeping people safe, keeping people flowing, now helping hopefully with dynamically redesigned supply chain, adaptive manufacturing practices, et cetera, et cetera. But I would also agree that India offers great opportunities around what you guys see around smart cities and all the projects around that, and in general, citizen services. I believe with COVID-19, we were challenged and then hopefully thrived on the challenge to create capabilities around dynamic redeployment of resource or, providing visibility and analytics around scenario planning and risk management and various other elements that we needed to deal with. And it put it right in the focus of understanding how to build more real-time, more precision, more specific services and products that cater to the new use cases and to the new demands that appear in the market. And with that in mind, I see many of the new policies that come out in India around data and the encouragement for private businesses to now start building data center parks or initiatives of the government around the compute and how that's going to get quantum compute in particular and going to get more prevalent in the country, as well as a lot of initiatives around talent. And the one thing that we truly appreciate around being in India is obviously the depth and the breadth of the very competitive technology ecosystem there, and access to top-class talent, vibrant, young, and very well educated. So we believe overall that we are moving in the right direction, and certainly see India as a place for us operating and delivering on our worldwide operations being a very central point. And we plan to, in fact, we are increasing our investments as we speak. And I'd like to see that our presence in the India market grows, and I believe partnerships between private and government are absolutely essential. And I would say forming a vibrant and functioning data center, a data-centric ecosystem, partnerships and relationships are very important. And of course, regulation in that sense could help. The one thing that still prevents us is some of the regulations around LiDAR data capturing in India, and that is obviously slowing us down in terms of achieving the level of accuracy and the level of capture that we would typically need. We find way to partner and figure that out. And in general, I think the situation around understanding of data and regulations around privacy, security, et cetera, are improving. And I'm certainly looking forward to see this going in the right direction and to continuous support for players like us.
Rajesh, you're not audible. Please.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, unmuting. Okay. Thanks, Sanimira, for some very positive comments. I'm absolutely delighted by your being bullish about the Indian market opportunities. And I never knew that 40% of your global headcount is based here out of India.
Yes.
That's impressive. That's
yes,
really
it is. Yeah.
And you made some very pertinent points about policy, the issue about LiDAR technology being used for data capture. If we have time, maybe we'll discuss it later in the session. With that, I'd like to invite my old friend Rajan Iyer to share his views. Rajan.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time zone. I'm Rajan Iyer. I'm with Trimble. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Rajesh and Sanjay. Always a pleasure to talk about the emerging opportunities in geospatial technology. Trimble has been in India for almost 20 years, although we have made it a strategic center of excellence in terms of delivering solutions for the global community. 10% of Trimble is in India at this point, and we are growing rapidly, both in terms of headcounts and also looking at very many different business opportunities. I think as India embarks on its, let's say, digital transformation process, converting into a $5 trillion digital economy, geospatial information, geospatial data, geospatial solutions are going to become more and more central to delivering this promise of the $5 trillion digital economy. I've heard of CTOs, Chief Technology Officers in companies. Today we have CDOs, Chief Data Officers, Chief Digital Transformation Officers, Chief Analytics Officers, and so on. So you can see the importance of data that is becoming more and more crucial, more and more seminal, and more central to an organization's functions. And that is true across all the industries, whether you are in IT, whether you are in construction now, or agriculture, or land administration, disaster management, smart cities, airports, ports, highways, etc. Right? So timely information, data-driven decision making, real-time data-driven decision-making, collaboration. These are all becoming very critical. And of course, in the post-COVID world, as we look at a new normal in which remote working, remote collaboration, remote data sharing and management in real time, combined with social distancing, that means people cannot crowd at a construction site or an agriculture site or survey and mapping and so on. As that becomes more and more critical, I think geospatial information and the need for geospatial information is going to grow rapidly. So if I look at the new technologies such as the previous speaker mentioned in terms of AI, IoT, cloud, there was a time when everybody was worried that if information goes into the cloud, they'll be compromised. Today, they don't want to invest in infrastructure. They say, give me a cloud solution. I mean, that is the kind of rapid transformation we have seen in, let's say, less than 5 years. So I think every industry is going to be transformed, and Trimble is part of the transformation, whether it is construction, transport, logistics, land administration, survey, mapping, managing natural resources. We are struggling with climate change issues. We are struggling with doing, bigger and bigger population, especially in emerging markets like India, emerging countries where the middle class is growing and the aspirations are high and the resources are getting more and more limited. Optimal use of natural resources, such as forestry, such as land, such as, raw materials. These are becoming more and more crucial, and I think geospatial technology is going to become central. It offers us the ability to do surgical things with surgical precision. We have heard of surgical strikes and so on by using technology and not disturbing, but just targeted approach. I think geospatial technology offers that capability because precise positioning is becoming more and more of a requirement rather than a nice to have or a desired feature. We talked about meters. Now we are talking decimeters, centimeters, and who knows, millimeters. And in this respect, I must congratulate the Survey of India in spearheading the project on setting up a nationwide continuously operating reference system that will give you positioning in real time up to centimeter level accuracy on any device. Bring your own device, and they will be able to offer surgical precision positioning. And positioning like computing and data and everything is like an aphrodisiac. The more accurate you are, the higher the accuracy you want. So I think that is going to really make targeted decision making very, very critical. Whether you're laying a runway or a road or building a building using a model-based construction, geospatial technology is going to be very important. So I think we all know that the importance. Now, when it comes to India, we have our own challenges. The first, I think, is even today, while IT has become mainstream, geospatial is taking like a little bit of a poor cousin or a backseat. So geospatial is almost like an afterthought. Okay, I have this digital data that I need to gather. Oh, by the way, I need a positioning tag associated with it. I think we need to change that and make geospatial at the forefront. I think that's one challenge. The second is obviously, it's like a vicious cycle because the more restrictive the policies are in terms of acquiring, disseminating, sharing, and using geospatial data, where people freely share geotagged information. If those restrictions are removed in a very concerted, measured, and coordinated way, the more geospatial technology will be used. Also, when it comes to folks like us, import restrictions. You can import cell phones with GPS and radio and so on all day long without any problem. But when we have to import our equipment, we have radio issues, we have import restrictions, we have to have so many different licenses and so on. And what happens is that our customers are not able to use these technologies very efficiently. By the time they go through the paperwork, it is time to wrap up the project. So I think we need to make the ease of doing business much more easier when it comes to things like importing of appropriate technology. Of course, made in India for India is a growing slogan, and I think companies should take advantage of that, as Trimble is definitely in the process. But I think appropriate technologies initially have to be imported, and then once the use becomes widespread, we start thinking about make in India, for India, and for the world, etc. There is no point in reinventing the wheel every time. I think in that respect, the NAVIC satellite program is very, very innovative and useful, because it gives us the ability to experiment and create new solutions. I think very important aspect and a challenge is the availability or the non-availability of qualified manpower. You can have all the technologies, but unless everything is going to be run autonomously, you do need qualified manpower. And I think in that respect, Survey of India, the Ministry of Skill Development have taken a very good first step, along with AGI and so on, to create a skilled manpower for survey and mapping. I think that is the basis, because if you have good survey and map data, then everything can be built. If the base is good, then everything can be built on that. So I think we need to continue to increase the availability of manpower and skill development. So for that, I think the solutions are obviously geospatial has to be introduced as a very important subject in schools and colleges, and some of these latest technologies have to be exposed. So education in schools and colleges, encouragement of startups, integrate geospatial technology in the tenders and the RFP as opposed to an afterthought. And I think having somebody like some agency like a Survey of India become a very important part of positioning as a service on land. As important as ISRO is to space, Survey of India, an organization like Survey of India, which has been probably the oldest government organization in India, with 250 plus years of experience, be the focal point and develop the skills in through Ministry of Skill Development, through after school programs and vocational training, etc., for people like surveyors, machine operators, geospatial technologies, and so on. Not everybody has to become an IT person in order to be in geospatial. We need domain-rich professionals, domain experienced professionals for this. So that's my little spiel on importance of geospatial technology in India.
Thank you, Rajan. In the interest of time, I'll straight away ask Madhav to give his remarks, and Madhav, you'll have to be brief. Thank you.
Rajesh, I believe that there is some challenge out there. What we could do is that we'll try to bring Madhav back at the end of the session, another session, and try to get Madhav back on in between. Thank you, Rajesh, for conducting this session, and we are still in the mid somewhere. There were a lot of good points made with regards to the expectations of our global companies in terms of the policy reforms, as well as it's actually very exciting to see that 48% of the manpower is in India, or 10% of Trimble is in India, and they have serious interest into this in this business here in India. We are taking note of all the the suggestions which have been made by these global companies with regard to the policy considerations, and we definitely make it a part of our applications to the EU.
I'll very quickly sum up some of the points that have been made by both Stanimira and Rajan Iyer in their deliberations. I think there is an agreement among both the speakers, and I fully endorse those comments. The Indian market is very promising, is large, there is untapped demand, there are big opportunities. Of course, the policy, I'll come to that in just a minute. There are a couple of very important points that Rajan made. One is geospatial is not yet mainstream technology in the mind of most of the organizations, CIOs, CTOs, and so on. And that we have to overcome if we really want to scale. And the second requirement is, when I speak to folks in Ministry of Electronics and IT, in context of Digital India, the term that's frequently used is India Stack, which is a set of different platforms which together constitute what they call India Stack. UID, Unique ID Authority of India, is one part of the India Stack. GSTN is another one. Direct Benefit Transfer is yet another one, and there are several others. And they together form the IT backbone of the country, various systems working independently and also seamlessly together. What we need, and maybe Sanjay, that could be a part of the recommendations, that geospatial stack should be an integral part of India's tech that they've built, and they are, of course, growing further. Geospatial, GS specifically, is a horizontal technology. It will find a place in every of those platforms which constitute India's tech, be it UID or GST and CBDT, direct benefit transfer. Currently, there's a usage in some of them, but it's sporadic, it's very transactional, if you know what I'm saying. If you have a full-fledged geospatial platform, which is providing services to all of them, then it becomes seamlessly integrated with all of them and truly becomes one of the driving forces for those and brings in the location as a key information parameter. So that's one. And maybe in the report that you're submitting, you could somewhere touch upon the need for a geospatial stack for the country. And the second part I want to touch upon, again, something that Rajan made was skilling. And I know work has been done by AGI along with Surveyor of India, but I think the real challenge we face in the industry, and I faced it in my own company, and I'm sure our industry colleagues have faced it too, and even in AGI, when I was involved with AGI, we used to discuss it, is that getting quality manpower at senior levels. We need project managers with deep understanding of technology. We need solution architects. We need geospatial professionals who not only understand geospatial, but also IT, big data analytics, AI, machine learning, IoT, because they are not independent. They are all integrated and seamlessly getting seamlessly integrated. Today, we have created silos. The computer science guys don't understand what geospatial is all about. They have a very peripheral knowledge, and they don't think it's worth their while to really understand this technology. Likewise, geospatial professionals think IT is not their domain. Let's leave it to IT. And to me, both are wrong. They both have to learn from each other. An IT professional who is designing a complex architecture for an enterprise system, if he or she doesn't understand geospatial, they have a problem. Same thing for the geospatial. So there's another aspect that we need to address: how we create high-skilled manpower, project managers and the like. And of course, we need to see, we keep talking about market. I mean, I've been in this industry, as you know, for decades. The lateral demand in India is high. I mean, Ola also made that point somewhere there. I don't think it's getting leveraged. So we have to look around and see how we invest in growing the market, how we scale the business for all the companies. Then FICCI, AGI, and others have to work together and see how we do it. And of course, we need enabling policy to make it happen, and other model business, public-private partnership. So these are some of the points I'd like to make based on what we discussed.
Thanks, Rajesh. So thank you very much, and we'll be back in 30 seconds with a new session of conversation with Rollen. Welcome back. This is the last session, a very exciting session. I'm going to present you Rollen, the Chief Executive Officer and President of Hexagon. I've known him for about little more than a decade, and he doesn't change in his appearance at all. So that's interesting. How does he maintain himself? But just to give you a brief about him, most of you may not know that Ola is actually a musician. And he played for orchestra, and then he went to college for studying law. Probably that law didn't excite him much. The heavy books of law didn't excite him much, so he went to MBA. And after having done that MBA, he joined a company, and working for that company, he got an offer to basically restart, or rather kind of, could join a company which was on the verge of probably shutting down. And he took over that opportunity to basically rebuild that company. And that's the company which we all know as Hexagon today. And in around 18 years of his career, or 18 to 20 years of his career with Hexagon Group, he brought that company from probably $50 million to almost $4 billion. That's the kind of track record he has. I always say that Ola has been someone who has disrupted the geospatial leadership, especially from 2004 to 2011 period. And I still remember my first interview with him when he talked about in 2008 that my biggest competitor is Google and nobody else. So that's the kind of background we have, Ola, with us, and that's exciting to hear from him and have a conversation with him. Welcome, Ola Rollen.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure, and I like to make it more conversation oriented and have you kind of share your perspectives. I've been hearing that you've been talking about autonomous age. Where do you see the autonomous age and sustainable future is connected, and what is the role of innovation in that?
Well, it's a complicated connect, but you could say it's mankind that creates a lot of fascinating things on this planet, but it's also mankind that destroys the planet in the process of doing so. So the more automated workflows we can create in literally any industry, the less we pollute, the less we destroy the planet that we've grown to like so much. And you will see this in industrial processes, in transportation, in societies, in cities, and so on. If we can disconnect mankind from these processes, they usually flow much better.
And how do you see the context of geospatial technology in the age of autonomous?
It's super important. If we take CO2 emissions, for example, the major culprits are transportation. And in the geospatial technologies will be enabling autonomous driving, which is a prerequisite to reduce queues and reduce traffic jams and things where we use and consume resources and emit CO2 without really getting anywhere. I don't know if you know that they made a study in the city of London. The average speed 150 years ago was 8 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
And it's still 8 kilometers per hour because you're bumper and everyone is running their engines and it's not very good.
So you're talking about the value of autonomous will actually decongest.
Yeah. Because you will have a coordinated flow of vehicles through, for example, a city center, and you can plan your journey. So maybe the computer will tell you that you leave 2 minutes later than you plan to do. And just by leaving 2 minutes later, you find your automatic slot in a queue model, and you don't need to stop by red lights and so on. That will be automated. So I think it's quite exciting what we can do with the current technology, mixing sensors with geospatial solutions.
Well, a couple of, maybe about 2 years back, you said that AI is still far away, and you gave an example of 10,000 types of images of cat, how to understand the cat's behavior through AI. What's your opinion on AI today?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat the last?
I said a couple of years back, you talked about AI is a little far away from us, and you gave an example of cat, 10,000 different kinds of shapes and moods of cat. And that's the kind of processing we need to capture the right expression of the cat. So what do you think in 2 years has changed, or you still hold the same opinion?
I think AI is slowly moving into much more mature technology. AI is not going to solve everything for us, but AI is going to enable us to design smarter systems where AI might take the heavy lifting when it comes to analyzing big data, vast data sheets and so on. And we see that happening. AI is getting smarter and smarter. So I think we're on the right path.
And how do you see various divisions of Hexagon technology portfolio, right from metrology to public safety to geospatial to geosystems, getting converged into making the smarter planet?
I think what we're focusing on are a few major areas. We think cities could become smarter. More and more people live in cities, and we are queuing a lot, whether it's waiting for food, waiting for deliveries, getting from A to B, and so on. So city life can become much smarter, and that's one priority for Hexagon. And then we look at manufacturing and construction processes, where we believe that we got the tools to make construction processes and manufacturing processes more automatic and smarter. And then finally, we have transportation, which is a problem in its own, where we need to become better at aviation, ground-based transportation, and so on. And we believe we have a role to play in all these applications.
So you talked about digitalization of constructions and manufacturing processes. And in this COVID situation, we are left with no other option but to basically go digital. So where do you see the geospatial role for geospatial technology? Is it going to grow very fast in the recovery model of the economy?
I think the role going forward for geospatial is it's not going to be the traditional geospatial only. It's going to be indoor positioning and navigation. It's going to be detailed maps that computers can read for autonomous cars and autonomous vehicles. I think more and more we are dependent on knowing where things are and how to get there, and that is only ever going to grow. So geospatial is going to shift from being traditional cadastre and so on to be a 3D tool to help us navigate in everyday life.
That's exciting. That's really having a view in the future. Let me come back to you with regards to your business in India. What do you think about, I know that you have been traveling to India much before joining Hexagon. And what kind of change you have seen in India in the last 25 years of your travel? And what kind of market opportunity do you see for Hexagon in India?
India is always, it's so fascinating to visit India. And things have always, every time you come back, even though it might be 6 months in between, so many things have changed. And if you compare India, I had the benefit of being very young in the 80s when things took off in Asia. So I've always benchmarked China with India. And India and China are not comparable when it comes to structure and so on, as we all know. But China has seen its growth, and over the past 30 years, it's been unprecedented. I think India still has its opportunities ahead of it, and I think that India will start grow in the next 5 to 10 years, and it's going to be super exciting to watch it grow. I think Indians are going to have a much better quality of life going forward, and I think you're going to have an opportunity to raise poverty and inequality and create maybe a much better society for all, for your people.
So after this, I'll take one more question from my side, then I will take questions from the audience, and I have also one guest who has some questions for you. So having outlined the kind of opportunities for 5-10 years for India in terms of growth, what kind of policy challenges or what kind of ease of doing business you have experienced which actually offers you a challenge in doing business in India?
India is bureaucratic because India is not one country. You have several states. There is a lot of approvals, and very often you got tender processes that are quite cumbersome for a company to participate in. And I think that is one of the great challenges of your leadership and your country, that you need to maintain control of what you do, but at the same time facilitate for change.
Thanks, Ola, for outlining that. And if I would like to welcome Girish Kumar, General Girish Kumar, who is the Surveyor General of India. Girish, are you in the call?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah.
Girish.
Hello.
So now I leave it to you with Ola for a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you, Ola, for your wonderful insight on the use of the geospatial technologies and its future, and how it is going to play a vital role in economic activities of any country. First of all, let me thank you also for your partnership with Survey of India, because in a few states, 2 states, your companies partner with us in establishing CORS network. And your company, despite COVID-19, they're trying to do their best, and I'm sure it will go through, and we'll be able to use this infrastructure best possible way. I have 2 questions for you. One is that we have been hearing a lot on your content program worldwide. So do you consider that content program in India on public-private partnership model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea that we would be happy to entertain if there was a possibility to do it. We have the equipment, we have the resources to deploy a content program throughout India. But I think in India it would be helpful to have a strong partner, i.e. the government, to back it up and use the data. But I would be very positive to a public-private joint venture around the content program. I think the content program is very important for any country because it lays the foundation for all sorts of decisions, from roads, railroads, water supply, power lines, and so on. So I think it would be a great investment for India to have access to fresh data on what it actually looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely we'll try to work out a program on this. The second question is, which I have been asking even the Trimble also, that why don't you consider India as your manufacturing hub for most of your equipment? Because in India now, we are one of the bigger users. The entire government machinery, private sector, everybody is using your equipment, and they're all being imported from outside. And why don't you, Government of India has already given some concessions for manufacturing in India, Make in India program. So why don't you consider manufacturing hub in India also?
It's a long process. First of all, the Indian market dominates in, maybe not in value, but in volume, by Chinese manufacturers. So we don't have a big enough sales volume today to motivate local manufacturing in India. But in sister divisions, we have started manufacturing. So we do manufacture for the automotive industry and so on, the equivalent of total stations for automotive, aerospace, and general manufacturing in Noida. And if we reach that critical threshold, then it would make a lot of sense to set up manufacturing in India. But right now, it's a trade-off between import duties and volume. It's as simple as that.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ola. And in the meantime, I'll see if there is any question in the chat. But what you talked about, by the way, the location of where I'm sitting down, your Hexagon metrology factory is just about 500 meters away.
So sorry, I lost you there.
I said the location of Hexagon metrology factory is just 500 meters away from where I'm sitting down now.
Ah, okay. There we have manufacturing, as you see.
Yes. So have you, I'm sure you have been keeping an eye on all the reforms which are undertaking currently in the country. And what do you think about one thing which will actually immediately attract you to be in India? Because what General Girish was talking about, that the government has come up with some kind of tax, free period for about 5 years or so on an investment, as well as you also get free from all the import duty. What is one thing which will actually expedite or rather attract you to come to India in more aggressive manner?
The sound is unfortunately quite bad right now, but I do believe that you asked me what would attract us to yes. Invest even more in India.
Yes.
It's always this catch-22 situation, demand, investment. Sometimes you have to invest to create demand, and sometimes you get demand before you invest. But I think that your country is on the threshold of reaching substantial growth, as I said previously, and that will generate demand. So I think the one thing that I've seen working in many countries is public-private partnerships, where you decide to resolve a problem. Let's say it's electricity distribution or something. You want to upgrade the power grid, and you invite private enterprises into this venture, and they invest, and they also reap the benefits from that investment. And that is a fast track to spur growth and enhance the quality in the country. And we talked about the content program. That's an excellent idea where we and the Indian government could set up a content program that could be used by all states, by all municipalities, by private corporations, and so on.
So basically, you're talking about the volume and the scale would be something which will attract you significantly.
Well, you have the volume. There is no doubt that India has the size. So it's really about setting some very obtainable, very, very concrete targets for the investments, what you want to accomplish, and not look too much into the future. Go for something, go for the low-hanging fruit first.
Thank you very much, Ola. I think this has been a great conversation with you, and thanks for being very candid and very focused in your, as always, very musical. I never see you kind of stuck up somewhere. You're so straightforward and so well articulated. Thank you very much for joining, and I know it's a very busy time for you. Still you found this 30 minutes for us. That's great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I think it's been great 3 hours of discussions. I think what we found a change today from our past events on the policy issues, that we were seeing very constructive and forward-looking viewpoints, and there was a very clear direction right from the PSA to set about the engagement and collaboration with the private sector, as well as opening the policies for utilization of data, and bringing some kind of innovation at the heart of governance. We also talked, PSA also very strongly talked about comprehensive policy, which is very important, and I think we as a team has to work together. Dr. Reddy, Girish Kumar, Kiran Kumar, and KK Singh made a very interesting point about public-private partnership, that we have to mature first to go to that level, and the public-private partnership could be only for very large and complex projects, and that's how it is happening worldwide. Moving forward, we did discuss about the sharing of data policy. I think there was a clear message that the data which has been collected on the public money should be available freely in an open environment for utilization by the citizens and the companies. When we moved to the international perspectives, and we found that the geospatial is emerging at the core of the government priorities in the developed economies, and that's where the government sees that the geospatial infrastructure and the information availability is something which is the mandate, and they want to talk about the guaranteed access of information because information is the key for everything today, because we live in information age. And that kind of mandate is being pushed by the developed countries, and that's where we have to reach moving forward. Moving further, we actually talked about the business opportunities in India. We really heard that the companies are very keen to have more and more business in India. They are willing to invest in India. They are willing to make in India. At the same time, they are also looking at the kind of approach where they find more viable engagements with the government sector, more long-term engagement with the government sector, more transparent engagement with the government sector, which is not necessarily being driven by the lowest one, L1 kind of strategy. So the multinationals are looking at Indian market with a lot of collaborative engagement, and that's very encouraging. After that, we had a wonderful session with Rollen, who outlined about the future of geospatial technology and how geospatial technology is going to be the critical infrastructure for autonomous age. And it will be something different kind of geospatial information, apart from just land record mapping or things like that. And that's the peeping in the future. And I think when we are looking to enter into the fourth industrial age, India as a nation should not be behind. It should be taking the leapfrog from that perspective. We as a geospatial media would like to urge all our delegates and our partners, especially to FICCI and AGI, to work very closely with the national think tank and develop a very comprehensive strategy document and public policy recommendations to the government of India, and work with the executives to bring this on the highest priority and make it more realizable. I saw some of the questions that coming out when this policy will come out. I think we are losing time, so we have to be very, very fast in that. Geospatial media does make its own commitment, reiterates its commitments to continue facilitating this dialogue, continue bringing you on the common platform, continue providing you with all the kind of required documentation and research work, which will help us, mature our level of interactions and engagements, mature our strategies, and mature our engagement with the government. So with this note, I would like to thank each one of you once again, and wish you stay safe, healthy, and happy. Thank you very much, and have a good day.